Thaddeus. Thaddeus. Thad. Hello, Thad. It's time.
Mary? No! Mary, it's not.
Yes, Thad, it is.
But there hasn't been enough.
Yes, Thad, there has. There has been plenty.
So much to do, so much to prove.
No, Thad, so much to believe in. I know, and you will too. I will see you soon, brother.
Mary? Mary, I'm not ready. I will see you soon, I hope.
My opinion of the telharmonic system is that it opens up unlimited.
Mr. Hertz? Oh, Mr. Hertz, it is heaven to hear the music of the net, especially under your wistful and imaginative leadership.
Stability is in the world of beauty. Being founded on scientific principles is in the world of beauty.
Mr. Hertz, what happened? Where did... I will hear it again, won't I? Possibilities in development. What good are possibilities to me now? I'd have hoped by this time in my life to quite regularly be hearing the glorious sounds of an orchestra. That everyone would be hearing those sounds. That my projects would have been at least useful. But capable of development? As viewed from this end of the path, there is something very unsatisfying about that.
Perhaps you could have believed in good enough. Perhaps the delights of mental labor were your rewards. Perhaps your facility for law...
Oh, perhaps. Whoever said hindsight is 20/20 was obviously still alive. Because looking back from here is like seeing through cataracts. Oh, but what hope the telharmonium gave me. What pleasure. For 30 years I lived and worked and dreamed that I, Thaddeus Cahill, would get electric music to the masses, that everyone would be enjoying those sounds, that black storm cloud that drifted over our horizon to devastate a family, like a fighter plane approaching to drop a bomb. That is the superlative triumph of science. Thousands of men, one invention, and life as we know it is better. One man and maybe one small footnote.
Music to your ears?
Relatively speaking, bittersweet. Such hope with that machine. Such triumph. Such failure. I guess one begets the other.
Your invention didn't fail, Thad. The business did.
The business always did. Even the electric typewriter could not feed a family. Come on, welcome to the 1901 World's Fair. Step right up and see an epic-making invention and an outstanding proof of the merits of America's patent system.
Cynicism doesn't become you, Thad.
And poverty does.
We never felt poor, nor did we blame you. Surely you know that.
I was blessed with a generous and loving family.
Among other things, Father called you a golden child. There was a reason for it.
We were his golden children, Mary. There were two golden children. You were blessed with the same creative intellect as I.
And cursed with contentment?
At this point in my existence, contentment does not seem like a curse.
Discontent is the father of invention, Thad. Had you not been dissatisfied with stenography equipment, the electric typewriter would have someone else's name with it.
It does have someone else's name with it, except perhaps in a footnote, barely a mention.
If there was no discontent, there would be no work for inventors.
Then I hope that where I'm going, I'll be unemployed.
With all your genius, you should know that things march on. Inventions lead to inventions. There will be many more, Thad, and many more after that. Individuals make progress a giant. Progress does not make dwarfs of individuals. You have made progress a giant.
Always the comforter, Mary. The brilliant, soft comforter. Then answer me this. How could such endowments, such prodigious labors, such repeated achievements be denied even ordinary success?
Arthur and George have said that none of the electrical typewriters produced by the major manufacturers in all the years since have compared to your first one. They said that your achievements are just a little below the angels. Be careful how you define success, dear brother.
My brother's loyalty and support are never-ending. And I don't recall them saying that.
You will.
For all my genius, Mary, you had as much as I, and somehow I believe much more than I did.
1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 4 is 3. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 6 is 5. 1 times 7, 1 times 6 is 1 times 8.
Enough already! Memorization. Memorization is all that was. Right, Mary? You did it also. You know it. Is that genius?
One day, Thaddeus. Quite an accomplishment for a child. Up to 12 times 12 in one day, committed forever, shows the promise of genius.
You did it also. It was nothing, just memorization.
It was a promise of genius.
A broken promise.
Not broken, Thad. Listen.
Oh, my Lord. It's Caruso.
I have listened to the Cahill harmonic electric music, and I must declare that...
But why is he talking? Sing, Enrico, sing!
it will bring a revolution into the musical world, both in its artistic expression and by bringing really good music to all kinds of people.
Say that again. Caruso himself believed that electric music would change the world. Maybe I wasn't as crazy as I think I was. I probably was. The head of the Royal Society of London asked me to prepare a paper on electric music for him. I am honored and incredibly thankful for the opportunity, Lord Kelvin, but I find it more important to work than to write about it. That's what I said to one of the most brilliant minds in science. I find it more important to work than to write about it. Where is all that work now?
You believed you knew what was best, Thaddeus, and you know in your heart that you turned down the opportunity because the work was more important to you.
Yes, I thought my work was important, the work to which I devoted my life, to which Caruso and Kelvin lavished praise. Now that this work runs a giant risk of being lost forever, it seems that writing about it may have been just as important. Perhaps more important.
Are you listening to yourself, Thaddeus? Now is not the time to question your accomplishments.
All I wanted was to bring the world, yes, the world, an understanding and appreciation of electric music. Then I would feel a sense of accomplishment.
You
Some
did bring
achievement to bring meaning to my life.
Have you forgotten the dropped jaws and awestruck crowds when you first introduced electric music to the world?
Musical perfection that can be achieved through electric sound is almost godly.
Yes, it is. And you have always known that. Remember all that you have done and the reasons you began.
The limitations of acoustic music are never more audibly apparent than when they are compared to the perfect music that can be created electrically. For people to hear, understand, and appreciate that music, that would be a dream come true. A life worth living, an entire life.
It's time to remember a few things, Dad. Remember that book, your Bible. Remember the excitement you felt when you first realized the incredible potential.
That book was a masterpiece, one that I shall never forget. On the Sensations of Tones by Hermann Helmholtz.
Father knew your capacity for science. Because of Father's training, you were an inventor and a scientist before you were an adult. You had the love of music.
I knew I loved music from my very first concert. It was Helmholtz who bridged music and science, who knew and explained that music and tone have a rigorous scientific nature. I will never forget when I read how he described tonal partials with mathematical certainty.
Remember that. Remember.
Helmholtz explained that the fundamental lowest tone and all the upper partials of that tone are created in the form of independent sine waves. The first fundamental vibrates at a reasonably constant rate. The second partial vibrates twice as fast. The third, 3 times. The fourth, 4 times. It was a simple exponential increase in the sound of the waves. I can recall confirming the theory with our piano. As I struck a single note on the piano, I could hear the full complement of partials over the fundamental created by all the separate vibrating sections of the string. I then determined that according to Helmholtz's brilliant theory, the vibrations in the center of the string would create the fundamental, and the second partial should be located halfway between the fundamental and the hammer. I reached into the piano and pressed my finger gently across the center of the string, hoping to nuke out the fundamental. As I struck the note, I could not contain my excitement as I heard the second partial become the new fundamental. By comparing the sound of that new fundamental with that of the note 1 octave above the note I was playing, I confirmed the theory for myself. The second partial of the original note was indeed the same as the fundamental of the note 1 octave above. The explanation is mathematical, but the potential seemed magical. Then it struck me like a wave of enlightenment. The cycles do not truly line up properly with a 12-tone division of the scale. Just intonation or perfect tuning arrives at the octave slightly sharp. This type of tuning would make a piano useless if played in more than one key. With 12 tones between the scales and 8 tones in each of the major and minor scales, the 5th note of each scale must be slightly sharp, and each 4th must be slightly flat. If I could divide the scale into more than 12 tones to include the tones needed for just intonation, I would then be able to produce true intervals in every key.
The science of sound had been disassembled, and you found a practical way to put it back together.
I was only borrowing the ideas of a true genius.
You are expanding on the thoughts of a genius, and as a genius, you must realize that your contributions will be just as important as those that preceded you.
Helmholtz constructed an electromechanical one-note synthesizer able to imitate the sounds of the vowels of the human voice. In his book, he included a schematic and detailed practical directions for constructing and operating the device. I had my own version up and running within 6 months of reading the book. Helmholtz discovered that the combination of tonal partials could be controlled with mathematical certainty. The telharmonium simply had an expanded range and playability. As I began to experiment with the concepts, I slowly came to realize that it would be possible to build an electric instrument having the ability to create the sounds of any acoustic instrument, suffering the limitations of none.
That's it, good. Keep remembering.
This realization was the impetus to my spending the rest of my life, my soul, my energies on the creation of a practical electric musical synthesizer, an instrument capable of combining tonal partials with absolute control over their various combinations and dynamics. I then discovered that if it were possible to create the sound as pure electric waves, they could be transmitted across wires and heard at several locations at the same time. It would be possible to transmit music to everyone willing to be wired for sound. All with the means could sit in their favorite chairs, in their own homes, enjoying the sweet tones of electric music. This was the goal that kept me working for 30 years.
I was deeply impressed with the wonderful purity and variety of tones produced by the telharmonium. To listen to the delicate tones of the flute or the clear tones of the French horn, and to realize that all this music in its wonderful mass of color and tone can be transmitted to any desired point almost passes comprehension. To distribute really good music by electric wires is, to my mind, one of the greatest benefits that could be bestowed on a community.
If only I had concentrated less on the distribution and more on the construction of the sound. Perhaps my dreams were too grand. If only I had focused on the one goal of creating perfect music electrically. An instrument without limitations, able to give complete control to the needs and sensitivities of the musician. Then, maybe, my method of sound synthesis would have been more complete when modern radio set us free from wire distribution. If my original idea for the instrument had been perfected, then radio would have distributed the sound flawlessly, as it does today.
Why must you continue to question your worth? You did what you thought was necessary, and sadly it did not always work out for the best. All of your intentions were justified.
Nothing in my life, either before or after, was ever as clear to me as my original intention. I saw it in my head and heard it in my heart, night after night. My spirit sang at the thought. A musician of the telharmonium would never suffer the frustration of the violinist with desire to play a full chord of notes, or the chilling embarrassment of the pianist who sits down in front of a piano that has slipped dreadfully out of tune. The dynamic limitations of the organ would never hinder a master of the telharmonium. From Helmholtz came the knowledge of the scientific nature of sound, the understanding that all the sounds we hear are just relative combinations of waves. Countless combinations are possible, just as countless sounds abound everywhere in our world. With this knowledge, and the help of my best friend and man's greatest resource, electricity, I could create any sound I desired. The concept was so simple. It was the implementation that became complex. The concept always remained intact. In my head, I could see the 12 pitch shafts spinning. I could hear the 12 tones with the full complement of harmonics they would each respectively create. I could feel the delight of musicians as they faced the limitless possibilities of the instrument. Each of the tones would be tapped from the shafts. As the pitch shafts continually spin, each tone is created at all times and is simply waiting for a depressed key of the manual to set it free. The tone then passes through a series of transformers that mold and sculpt the raw electrical information into a wonderful and glorious sinusoidal wave. All of the sine waves are combined into a large transformer that unifies the signal, sending it out to the receiver that vibrates in relation to the signal and creates the sound for the ears of the waiting public. In 1898, I began constructing a model of the telharmonium in my laboratory in Washington, D.C. I'll never forget the day my brothers and I transmitted music from my laboratory in one part of the city to my home in another part. We all cheered, knowing we were on to something big. It took 3 years to complete the model, and I then felt ready to seek funding. I approached Oscar Crosby, a developer of electric railroads and a Washington capitalist. Together with Frederick Todd, they arranged a dinner for bankers and businessmen at the Maryland Club, a private club in Baltimore. In the dining room of the club was a telephone receiver attached to a horn. I was in Washington with my musician and the telharmonium model. We received the cue from Mr. Crosby and began to play. Conversation ceased. You could have heard a pin drop in the Maryland Club that night. But what you heard was by the end of the dinner, the men had promised $100,000 for my instrument and selected a new site for my laboratory, Holyoke, Massachusetts. I left for Massachusetts to begin the love affair of my life. For the next 4 years, I worked in Holyoke to build my dream. I set up my laboratory called the Electric Music Company, and proceeded to invent an instrument
that produced pure and perfect music, Thaddeus.
It was pure and perfect, wasn't it, George? I was exalted. I based electric music and mathematics.
And for the first time in the world, dear brother, you compelled it to speak, always and only in the exact number of vibrations per second that resonate properly in the mind. Even an untrained ear is displeased if a singer passes from 256 vibrations to anything but 384 vibrations. 383 and 385 will displease. 384 will delight. The listener may not understand what is happening, but he knows when he hears perfection versus imperfection. When men, either learned or ignorant, heard music with those absolutely correct pitches in every tone.
And in every chord, and in every harmonic of every tone of every chord.
They responded with great satisfaction and approval. That is how we got to New York, Thad. To New York.
That was a time, wasn't it, George?
It was that. You had toiled.
Joyfully.
You had toiled joyfully for 4 years in Holyoke. It was time, though, to move the Telharmonium to New York.
43.5 tons of machine in 22 boxcars. I remember exactly.
A true testament to the magnitude of your joyful toiling. And at the end of that train ride,
September 26th, 1906. And the beginning of a glorious 2 years. Those were 2 years to be proud of.
We were proud of all the years, Thaddeus. But those two were especially joyous because
they were filled with such promise.
Because they filled you with such joy. Remember that joy?
I do. Who could forget 900 members of the New York Electrical Society storming the doors of Telharmonic Hall to hear the first concert? It wasn't perfect.
But it was happy.
Yes, Majesty, it was happy. A room full of scientists all there to hear my invention.
900 of them, Thad. 3 times the usual turnout for their meetings. They were there to hear your invention. And that was the perfect way to introduce it to scientists.
And they were excited. Though the machine still wasn't perfect, Majesty, they were excited.
And quite taken with what they heard. They were technical people, Thad. Scientists. They were taken.
and because of that, service soon began at the Café Martin.
Oh, don't remind me. All those reporters, and our machine with those shrill F sharps, and a bad case of diaphragm crack. It wasn't perfect.
Oh, but it was good. Good enough for the Café Martin, Sherry's, the American Museum of Natural History, the Casino Theater, the Waldorf Astoria, the Victoria Hotel.
And Mark Twain.
The trouble about these beautiful novel things is that they interfere so with one's arrangements. Every time I see or hear a new wonder like this, I have to postpone my death right off. I couldn't possibly leave the world until I have heard this again and again.
1906. It was a very good year.
Oh, we were praised that year.
What was it called, George?
The leading new electrical craft of the year.
And Mr. Twain was the first to have music delivered to his home. He was the first to have residential telephone service and the first to have telharmonic service.
When I die, I shall exult over all the other dead people, for I was the first to turn music on tap, on and off in my house like gas.
Not bad having Mark Twain as your biggest fan.
He even liked the singing arc lights.
You had to ruin a good memory, didn't you, George?
I don't know why the singing arc lights annoyed you so much.
Because they turned Telharmonic Hall into a carnival show. A gimmick, that's what they were. Come on and welcome to the 1901 World's Fair. Step right up and see an epic-making invention and an outstanding proof of the merits of America's patent system. They turned my passion into a sideshow.
They made quite a stir, though.
Hear the singing arc lights, the wonder of an age.
That's my point. You toil joyfully or not, you toil for a lifetime to create an instrument that revolutionizes music and has the capacity to reach thousands of people. And what do you get? Barely a mention. Some kid uses your machine to pump music through a lamp. And suddenly, the lamp is the wonder of an age.
You're a novelty fad. Every great accomplishment gives birth to some novelty items.
Damn it, George, I'm an inventor. That's what I do. Do, and a good one, maybe a great one. You will forgive my vulgar vanity, but I am proud of the Telharmonium. This is a machine like no other. I do not need a novelty as a testament to my life. I am proud of my life's work.
We're proud of you, Thaddeus. I am especially proud of you now, right now,
Why?
because you are proud.
Is it asking too much to be remembered for the invention and not its novelty spawn?
Novelties are a form of flattery, a form of praise, nothing more except the praise.
I shall.
If a great princess marries, what is to hinder all the lamps along the streets on her wedding night playing that march together? Or if a great man should die, I, for example, they could all be tuned up at dirge.
George,
Yes, Dad.
when I'm done dying, do me one favor.
What's that?
Don't turn any arc lights up to any dirge. In fact, leave the arc lights quiet, please. Hear the singing arc lights, the wonder of an age, was a slogan used in the press releases announcing the opening of the public station for broadcasts and concerts. The opening was January 14th, 1907. It was a media blitz. The releases dubbed the station Telharmonic Hall, printed a brochure called Tel Harmony, which explained my machine in simple terms, and promised 2 wonderful concerts daily at 3 and at 8:30. Admission was 50 cents. The opening was preceded by a gala reception on January 11th with a private concert at Telharmonic Hall, followed by a dinner at Sherry's and several other fine restaurants where more of the music was given. The guests heard Mendelssohn's Song of Spring, selections from William Tell, as well as various ragtime syncopations. The guest list read like a who's who of New York, and they were delighted. The critics raved, stating, as I dreamed, that the Telharmonium combined all of the world's great instruments, but with fuller tones and none of their inherent defects. When the public concerts began, people were amazed, though the machine was still not perfect. Music emanated from the ceiling, from the ferns, from the divan, even from an urn. People flocked, and the number of daily concerts was expanded from 2 to 4. The possibility of transmission across telephone wires engendered talk of huge profits. In the words of Alfred Hertz, conductor of the Metropolitan Opera,
You have a system that can do anything you want in music. It is wonderful, and I believe in Telharmony as an art of music.
we thought that nothing could stop us. The New York company had a wonderful product to sell, a safe full of contracts, the best clubs, restaurants, hotels, nothing but blue skies ahead.
Until the managers made 2 serious mistakes. In one where they acted too early, and another they were too late. First, they took on too heavy an expense account, and secondly, they waited to apply for a franchise to put their own cables in the street until after the world already knew about electric music.
I did it right, George. I acted quickly, I kept my costs to a minimum, I made the machine as good as it could be. It would have worked if they had listened to me. I know that.
Oh, we believe that, Thad.
You toil, and you toil, and you toil. The public concerts, all that I wanted from my machine. If only I had been able to create the sound that I desired. If only I had been able to get around the wires in the streets. If only I had been able to transmit the music in my own way. That's why I continued to work on it. That's why I continued to spend my life and our money on it.
Our faith in your genius and our appreciation of your work were too great to let you stop, Thad. The Telharmonium was too valuable. It was a different world back then, Thad. It's easy now to see many factors that make the business mistakes fatal. The Depression, the huge money panic of 1907, the World War.
The business undertaking was doomed to failure by events which no amount of genius could have foreseen or prevented.
I am absolutely certain that a great success and a great fortune could have been made if only they had listened to you. Instead, the success was in the invention and not in the fortune. Electric music was ours, all of ours. Even if it should disappear from the world forever, we had it, and it was wonderful.
People believed that the wireless was inspired by electric music, that by inspiring the way of the future, you undermined your own wonderful accomplishment.
What? Say that again.
People believed that the wireless was inspired by electric music, that you inspired the way of the future, that electric music is not dead to the world.
Mary. George. Did you hear that? Did anybody else hear that?
Yes, Thaddeus, it's true. I can show you now because you can believe it.
Show me, Mary. Show me. Then it will be time.
It's time, Thad.
Thaddeus Cahill, lawyer and inventor, known to his friends as a man of wisdom, of consideration for others, of wide learning in law, history, science, electricity, music, and for his unusual breadth of views on many subjects, died suddenly at his residence on Thursday, April 12, 1934. A few moments before, he had been in his usual good health and cheerful spirits. Apparently, he passed away without any warning, and his face showed no signs of pain, fear, or discontent. Thaddeus Cahill's achievements were just a little below the angels. He died as he lived, understanding and appreciating the value of his life's work, and giving suffering, pain, sadness, any and all negative emotions barely a mention.